The human brain can be considered as a complex structure that actually makes life possible. Its average weight runs about 3 libras, and it is located inside a bony structure named skull that protects it from external impact. It floats in a liquid underneath the skull known as cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF, which is not really a bond but absorbs shock that prevents the brain from impacting the skull. The brain represents the center of the nervous system and contains an estimated number of 100 billion neurons. It's almost 80% water, and its consistency resembles as that of gelatin. This complex organ is also protected by a set of tissue layers beneath the skull, called meninges, subdivided into dura mater, arachnoid, and the most internal, pia mater. These three kept the CSF from leaking. When talking about internal structures of the brain or the inside, two matters appear. The white matter is involved in distributing long-distance connections and provides most of the brain's structures and communications, whereas the gray matter contains a numerous amount of neural cell bodies and relatively few myelinated axons. Additionally, the brain consists of 3 main components, known as cerebrum, cerebellum at the top of the spinal column, and the brain stem. Finally, regarding its structure, it is divided into 2 hemispheres that mirror each other, the left and the right one, both connected by an interhemispheric fissure named Sylvian fissure that is composed by several fibers known as corpus callosum. These hemispheres share 4 lobes or functional areas, known as frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, and occipital lobe.
The frontal lobe, located in the front region of the brain or forehead space, is crucial for motor movement, for our ability to speak, and for cognitive knowledge skills such as problem solving or thinking. Having said this, any damage in these areas of the brain may truly bring peculiar and specific consequences, most of them irreversible. Imagine an elderly lady who suffers from high blood pressure and decides to no longer control her habits, eating and taking medication, plus the inevitable health consequences of her progressing age. One day, she suffers a stroke which affects her frontal lobe. The consequence may be problems with sequencing, difficulty in decision-making, decreased attention, changed personality, decreased in verbal expression, problem-solving difficulties, lack of spontaneity, uncontrolled emotions.
The temporal lobe, located beneath the lateral fissure and in the central area underneath the frontal and parietal lobe, is fundamental for hearing. In this lobe, we find Wernicke's area, a region of the brain concerned with the comprehension of language, located in the cortex of the dominant temporal lobe. Damage in this area causes Wernicke's aphasia, characterized by superficially fluent grammatical speech, but an inability to use or understand more than the most basic nouns and verbs. This lobe involves also auditory sensation and short-term memory. Now imagine a drunk rock star who sadly decides to drive home in his Lamborghini. A deer crosses the road and he crashes against it. Suppose that a piece of glass penetrates into his head and damages his temporal lobe. The consequences might be problems identifying objects, problems with understanding spoken words, problems with selective attention, increased in aggressive behavior, problems categorizing objects and locating them, and problems with facial recognition.
The parietal lobe, located in the upper part of central region of the brain, just behind the frontal lobe, is composed of the somatosensory cortex, crucial to interpret sensation from the body like sense, temperature, and vibration. It is also crucial for our ability to understand speech, language, and what we read. The occipital lobe, located in the bottom back part of the brain, is important for vision, identification, and interpretation of colors and shapes. Gives meaning to what we see. Now imagine a woman that lives alone and one day a thief enters into her house. She hides and hits his head with a hockey stick. Her occipital and parietal lobe get damaged. The consequences might be, in the occipital lobe, there would be a loss of visual field, problems to locate objects visually, problems with color identification, word blindness, problems with movement perception, problems with reading and writing. In the parietal lobe, there would be difficulty in naming objects, loss of eye-hand coordination, problems processing tactile sensation, diminished cognitive abilities, confusion between right and left, decrease in spatial orientation.
The cerebellum controls gross and finer motor coordination, voluntary motor skills, balance, equilibrium, eye movement, and postural control. So any injury in it could make simple activities truly difficult, such as riding a bike, even standing straight without falling. The brainstem is the posterior part of the brain and controls major survival functions, like providing main motor and sensory stimulation of the nerves. Any damage on it could complicate our body temperature, management of heart rate and breathing, balance, movement, swallowing food and liquids, vertigo, and nausea. Finally, imagine an adventurous woman who decides to climb a mountain but falls from a risk. His cerebellum gets damaged, and the brainstem too. The consequences for a damaged cerebellum would be problems with voluntary motor skills, loss of balance, problems with gross and fine motor skills, and loss of equilibrium, also loss of coordination, loss of postural control, and loss of eye movement control. Damage in the brainstem could imply difficulty to regulate body temperature, loss of efficient management of heart rate, problems swallowing food and liquids, vertigo, and nausea.